Welcome to the Talent Report Plus Thrive podcast, where we dive deep into the ever-evolving topic of talent with insights from MRA members. I'm your host, Jim Morgan, Vice President of Workforce Strategies at MRA, and I'm thrilled to guide you through these conversations with our MRA members who are industry experts, thought leaders, and passionate professionals at the forefront of talent development.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the August edition of the Talent Report. We're going to be having some discussions around what happened at the National SHRM, some of the topics that they had, and the three folks that we have with us were all participants at it. And so I think you'll really enjoy what they have to say. I'm now very excited to welcome our panelists onto the stage. All three of these folks were at the SHRM conference. I guess it was a little over a month ago now. And when we were taking names and meeting people while we were there, these were three of the folks that came up. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a minute, but we represent Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Ohio here. So I'm just going to ask you each to introduce yourself. Sarah, I will just start with you. If you can give us a little background on where you're from and what you're doing, we'll go around the room, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you learned at SHRM.
Yeah, absolutely. I am Sarah Burkholtz. I'm the Assistant Director of Human Resources for Cook Companies. Cook Companies is a group of companies in the transportation, logistics, and warehousing space. We are based out of Minneapolis. We have about 1,300 employees currently, but we are nationwide. So I like being able to go to the National SHRM conference to get that education about what everybody around the United States is doing when it comes to HR.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Heather?
Yeah, hi. I am Heather Boyer. I work at COSI, or the Center of Science and Industry. I've been here about 8.5 years. If you grew up in Ohio, you might have visited it in a field trip when you were a kid. But yeah, this was my first SHRM conference. I think of the three of us, I think that I'm the only rookie. So hopefully I can offer a little bit of a different perspective that way.
Great. Thank you. And Valley, this is your first one too, right?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's my 12th or my 15th National SHRM conference, but hello, I'm Valley Ellihausen. I am the Chief People Officer for AB Data, which is a privately held company located in Glendale, Wisconsin, which is north of Milwaukee. We have about 280 employees. The majority are in Wisconsin. However, we're across 26 states. We have offices in Washington, D.C., West Palm Beach, Florida, London, and Tel Aviv. And so we are predominantly what one would consider a professional services company. We do nonprofit and political campaign management, as well as class action administration.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us, giving your life for our cause and volunteering to be here today to just sort of talk about some of the things. There are a lot of people there, a lot of different topics, breakouts galore. So just wanted to kind of get your takeaways. And when we talked earlier about this, all three of you mentioned artificial intelligence. So Valley, I'm going to start there and let each one of you sort of share your AI thoughts or what you heard, and we'll just get that from all three of you and then learn some of the other things that you did. So Valley, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. I will share a quote that I felt like summed it up pretty succinctly from one of the speakers that's a professor for Harvard. AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And you know what he talked about isn't anything that we kind of don't already know, but it's more of that really not sticking our head in the sand, accepting that we have to think with a digital mindset, and that change is ultimately kind of inevitable. So it needs to be one of the core competencies that we think about from a leadership stance, and really push in on the safety around that change as a skill, because we have a learning imperative around AI. And it's not about like in our world of HR, it's not necessarily about us doing it. It's about us understanding it and how it fits, where it fits, why it fits, embracing it in that sense, and really just starting to get comfortable with the uncertainty. Now, I'll pick on Jim for a second because he reminded me of a particular feature on uncertainty when Steve Jobs couldn't get his clicker to work. See, now you're in the same ranks as Steve Jobs. Rather than fumble all over and stall, he just kind of took that uncertainty as an opportunity to create certainty. And, that's what we have to kind of get around with AI and not get behind. Because if we get behind, we're going to struggle to recover, particularly because I don't think we understand the forest reaches of AI. I mean, look at how we're doing today, right? I mean, we live in a very different world.
Great. Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, I think similarly, I just realized that I feel like I'm a little bit behind. I'd used ChatGPT, a handful of times, felt like I was up on it. But then to hear the variety and breadth of different ways that you can use AI, different challenges that's going to create in not only my organization, but, all organizations, and getting ready for that, preparing is something that I need to focus on a little bit more, is educating myself. So starting yesterday, I did a webinar on AI and recruiting, variety of tools that I hadn't even thought about using AI.
I think another thing that is interesting about the advent of AI and how quickly AI tools have been coming up and being utilized throughout the United States and throughout the world in different business functions is also that the laws and the legal compliance around AI is coming up really fast behind it in a way that we don't necessarily usually see, I feel like. And that was more what I was interested in. I think that the conversation around AI has been really prevalent over the last year, and there's been a lot of educational opportunities around AI. So I was actually avoiding AI-related sessions when I was at SHRM because I was like, I've heard this all, and I know it's going to be a focus. But the area that I did stumble upon and found to be a little bit more interesting and applicable to what I have been looking at when it comes to AI is the legal compliance aspect of it. Colorado which we have operations in Colorado, has already passed a law, Colorado's AI Act, that goes into effect on February 1st of 2026. And so there's already laws that we are going to need to be cognizant of and applying to our workplaces, even this new into AI technology being used, which is very interesting. The other part of that legal compliance thing, and there's court cases, the one against Workday is one, that have talked about AI's use within the HR industry and talent selection in particular, how that bias that can be created by AI is something that the courts are saying it doesn't matter if this is a technological tool that you're using, there still needs to be human management. And that kind of circles all the way back to Valley's point, where it's not like AI is taking over our jobs. It's AI is a tool that we will have to be able to utilize as professionals to continue to advance, or our competitors are going to eclipse us if we're not introducing that to our businesses. So those parts of AI is more what I was focused on and learning about at SHRM this year.
When we had the AI webinar series earlier this year, one of the things that was made real clear to everyone was you're responsible for whether or not this is working or not working, or biased or unbiased. And, it all came back on the company, even though the algorithm might have been wrong or whatever, it's going to be your fault as the company because you should have known that. And I think that sort of put a little bit of a jolt into everybody, like, whoa, I thought I'd be able to trust some of these folks. And they're sort of saying, nope, you're on your own on this one. You better make sure you've got it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Valley, let me go back to you. A couple of other things that you picked up while you were at the conference.
Yeah, there was a significant emphasis, and again, this isn't new, but it It's one of those conferences that makes you kind of just rethink, refresh, and reimagine what you might be doing. I mean, that's generally how I see the conference, and the networking that comes with that, and the brain power behind sharing is so powerful for me. But upskilling and reskilling of the workforce, we got to survive and we got to thrive. We know where we head routinely into more competitive space. We just talked about AI and how that tool should help us as humans do better, be more productive, be more capable. So we have to think about how that automation affects the workforce and where we have the opportunity to upskill and reskill. The other thing they talked about, and I think it's a generalization, but we still see gaps coming out of the educational systems for some of our workforce. And so being sure that we've kind of grounded the areas that we have expectations of competencies and placing real emphasis in learning around that. And then the last thing is really just thinking about the current need is immediate, right? And if we go back to AI, I mean, some of that we see, DoorDash will now deliver me batteries in a heartbeat if I need that, right? So we have a generation coming that wants everything now. So that includes learning and development, and they're ready. And so we have to be thinking about how we build those systems, and it isn't a one size fits all approach anymore. So really thinking about how your LMS is a catalyst to do that was part of that learning. And then this is my last one, and this goes back to kind of our jobs are really hard. They are. HR is not I come to work every day and I work, but we have to upskill ourselves. We as HR professionals have to really be full business partners, and that means really understanding the business.
So one of mine is kind of a small scale thing, but we have always had in our handbook, a trial probationary period for our new team members. And one of the sessions I went to was called Please Sue Me. I forget exactly what the case was, but it was around somebody who was in their, first 90 days or trial/probationary period. And this attorney was saying how, first of all, if you have those, get rid of them. Most of us are in at-will state anyways. So, but it also made me think, he also said, it sounds like you're making people a product. And if the product is faulty, you're just going to throw it in the trash or return it. And that's a terrible way to feel as a new team member or employee. So one of the things I brought back to my executive team was, can we get rid of that? And while they weren't ready, to scrap the whole thing, I could convince them to, let's call it an introductory period and put more of a positive spin on it. We're introducing them. We're not trying them out. So that's just a little thing that I brought back and was able to get some changes in my organization. And then the other kind of broader thing is, going to this conference, and I've always gone to the Ohio SHRM conferences in the past. It just kind of, Steve Brown in particular, I promise he did not pay me to say this, his presentations always have a way of reminding me, to remember the human side of human resources, that, inherently most people are good, wonderful people. Might sound a little cheesy, but that would be my second big takeaway.
All right. Thank you. Sarah, what did you pick up?
I have a couple of things, but I want to echo what Heather said about Steve Brown, just because I'm not from Ohio, and so I have no skin in the game with Steve Brown. But he really just kind of that positivity that he brings, and that's kind of how these SHRM conferences overall are, right? Like that's the goal of this SHRM conference. It's networking with other professionals on this huge level where you really get re-energized, you get those ideas, you get those strategies, you get, new concepts that might be new to you, you get your own professional development, and that positive atmosphere of SHRM, it really is something worth just taking a minute to really focus on that, because I do think that our jobs are hard. Our jobs are, we're having to deal with people problems. We're having to deal with business problems. We have to deal with legal compliance. There's so many different things that are coming at us all at once. It feels like that having that space where we can connect with other HR professionals in this field is really this like positive and overwhelmingly warm experience. So if you ever do have the chance to go, I would encourage going at least once. For me, compensation is a big part of my focus for Q4 in particular. Both Minnesota and Illinois have passed pay transparency laws that go into effect on January 1st. And so getting myself educated around pay transparency and pay equity has been a real big focus of mine. So that's a little bit of what I focused on with my SHRM sessions. I attended 2 sessions, Beyond a Paycheck, Pay Equity's Unexpected Impact on Employee Well-Being, and Pay Equity Update, EEOC, OFCCP, and What to Expect in a Presidential Election Year. So as you can imagine, those 2 sessions, like polar opposites as far as what they were talking about when it comes to pay equity, but both really valuable because it's both. It's both how is pay equity reflecting who we are as an organization and how we are treating our employees and our culture, staying competitive with market, being able to retain the top talent, how are we applying those things, but then also the legal compliance part of it, the regulations around it, and that focus that is coming from places like the EEOC and collecting pay data in particular. And I know, a couple of years ago, we had to submit our pay data with our EEO1 reports. And the expectation, the forecast that they are making, at least the speaker in this session was making, is that we can likely expect that to happen again. It probably wasn't a one-time shot, and we will see that pay equity reporting coming back on a federal level, in addition to some of the state levels where we are already seeing the pay equity reporting. So those 2 were both really impactful for me and helpful for me as I, look at constructing some of my training and education around pay transparency in Q4, getting ready for 2025. And then the other session that I attended, which was a little bit of a surprise in the value that I found in it, was around ethics. So I am both PHR and SPHR certified through HRCI, and HRCI has an ethics requirement for their certifications. And so I attended ethics in HR, avoiding a line in the sand, to fulfill my ethics requirement for this year. So it was a check a box kind of a session for me. And it ended up being like this really valuable education for me around utilizing ethics and respect in the workplace and having an ethical code of conduct for our leaders and our organizations, because that respect piece is so important in seeing our organizations be successful. And there's been a lot of talk about this lately. I just saw an article on hacking HR on LinkedIn about kindness in the workplace. And it's, SHRM has their civility program that they have been really focusing on over the last few months. It all comes down to the same things. It's all about, making sure that we are, and we are these champions in HR of these cultures of respect and kindness and hearing each other out and treating each other fairly, and how big of an impact that can have on the business success of our organizations. So that's what I had.
That's nice when you get the bonus. You check the box and you got some information that you really needed. So
exactly.
Heather, we had a little bit of a glitch during your second point. Could you just sort of refresh that one?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. For being a science center, our Wi-Fi can be really spotty. So just let me know if it breaks up again. I apologize. But yeah, my second one was just around particularly the Steve Brown session and how he does a really good job of reminding you that, of the human side of human resources. A lot of times we get caught up in the day-to-day, more negative aspects of dealing with our humans. But he reminds us that, inherently, most humans are really wonderful people that just want to be heard. And so sometimes we need to be that person. So I think that was the gist of it. Did I get everything the second time around pretty much?
I think that was pretty good.
Okay. And everybody could hear me that time?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So it's that simple. If we'd just all be nice to each other, we'd be all set. I think that's my takeaway.
If only.
Jim, I missed one. I'm sorry on my thing.
Go ahead,
it kind of goes back to your talent report too. One of the ones I want to, which is simple, is about surveys and the importance of hearing employee voice as your evidence in helping make decisions in HR. Partner with your CEO to leverage that data, whatever it is. But they really talked about the value of more pulse surveys versus the big annual survey, because a lot of times we take that big annual survey and sometimes it takes us months to really digest the data, then develop, and employees, get that kind of sense of, whatever. They don't necessarily care. And so really doing far more pulse surveys. And I took that and I've done 2 pulse surveys now with my monthly, put it right in UKG as our system. And I have tremendous response rates. It's 5-ish questions, but it was super helpful. The last one was simply focused in on our paid time off policies. And we're going to make some changes for 25. And I don't think I would have got that. I mean, I knew that was kind of a looming issue, but I didn't have. And so I'm really thinking about the value of that in a repeated cycle. Not that there isn't value in conducting the annual bigger survey, but that immediate response in the next newsletter about what happened in the past survey and what we're doing has built that trust that's very essentially important to moving certain business pieces forward.
That's a really interesting point, because I'm hearing more from companies that, like every other day, a single question pops up on the login where they just say, hey, take 10 seconds and let us know, something like that. And to your point, the quickness of the feedback, where we just asked this question in June, we got the results back in 24 hours, and we're having meetings on it now to decide what to do. And gosh, we're going to make a change for 2025. As an employee, that's faster than we do anything, and I think that's just that feedback loop is so quick that I think that's a pretty neat way of doing it.
Yeah.
So there was I'm sure there was a vibe at the conference, and you're down there and everybody's walking around, you're seeing the topics and all the rest of that. What do you feel like? What's going to happen in HR? What's everybody talking about? Where do you think it's going?
Well, the first day it was all, we're not going to get to see Ted Lasso.
Legit.
True.
But overall, I think the 3 of us talked about it in our prep meeting. We were all really impressed by Sherry Shepherd the last day and what she brought to the conference. I can't even remember specifically what her talk was about, but just in general, she was super entertaining. And a really good way to end the conference. I'll say that.
Okay.
I think resilience is what I would say the overall topic of Sherry Shepherd's session, or her general session was, which I think was, really beneficial for us as HR professionals as we're heading back into our workplaces, just because it's this continue, and it feels like this, when you are in these HR professions and trying to move some of these strategies and ideas and best practices and laws and all of this stuff forward in your organizations, it feels like there's so many times where you're putting yourself out there and just getting shut down by your leadership. And so that I think for me, one of the reasons why Sherry's session in particular was so impactful is because a lot of what she talked about was just continuing to put herself out there and doing it afraid, right? Like like, I don't know what my leadership is going to say about this. I don't know if I'm going to get the buy-in that I need to get this off the ground, even though I know it's what's best for us as an organization for legal compliance or best practice or the culture that we're trying to shift. But keeping on doing that, keeping on putting yourself out there and doing good for these organizations, I think was a real good takeaway for me personally, about how we can continue to move forward and continue to get things done by putting ourselves out there and doing it afraid, and knowing that we might not get the feedback that we want, but still continuing to fight the good fight.
Yeah, that is what she said, right? Doing it afraid, kind of living in that uncertainty and looking at it as an opportunity to create certainty, was where she is. In the conference for me, I was it helps keep me in a aspirational stance. Mm-hmm. I just haven't done it yet, thought and mindset. And I appreciate the openness that occurs between the colleagues that are there, the willingness to share, even though we all acknowledge we are potentially competitors of one another in some way, shape, or form. We don't look at that and walk away. Like, we engage in those conversations and we really problem solve in a gritty way together. That goes back to kind of what Sarah said, where we do model and coach civility. We do model and coach how to be kind, but engage in debate that helps move innovation in an organization. And that's where we bring the greatest value. And I look at some of those like arguments with maybe my leadership team over minor things, and I take the small wins. And that, I think, goes back to, resilience and our ability as professionals to remain resolute. Like, we are admirably purposeful. We are unwavering in some of and that means we might get knocked down and we'll get back up again. Or we look at things and go back to, like, how do we be better business partners? We look at things and go, okay, maybe I didn't think about it that way. Mm-hmm. Maybe what I did wasn't perfect or wasn't that perfect place, but I bet if I mush these two together, I'll get there again. And I mean, that's what I appreciate about being at the table and that value partnership.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, thanks all three of you for doing this. I appreciate your kind of bringing back the learnings and the things that you found down at the conference. Thanks to our three panelists for sharing everything that they learned down in Chicago, and look forward to seeing you again in September. We'll talk a little bit about a strategic approach to total rewards, and hopefully I'll also see you at our compensation conference coming up in September.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Report Plus Thrive podcast. Stay connected for more exclusive insights directly from our MRA members. Check out the show notes for valuable resources on today's topics. If you have questions or want to learn more about MRA, find my contact information in the show notes or check out www.mranet.org.